Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Growth Design Podcast. I have my co host with me, Emmanuel.
Hi guys, it's good to be back again.
Yeah, and in today's episode, we have a guest that I am so proud to know him. And it's been a great time just getting to know him as well. And I've taken one of his courses and just very religiously read much of the things he puts on LinkedIn and in his newsletter. And I'm sure you will learn a lot. We've got Ryan Scott with us today. Hi, Ryan.
Hi, good to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah. The one thing that you need to know about Ryan ultimately is if you are trying to understand or learn business from a designer who has real world expertise, business expertise to be specific, definitely he's your person. For the past 20 years, Ryan has run multiple businesses, is coached a ton of designers. He's led cross-functional teams. He was an early employee at DoorDash, where he reported to the company's co-founder. He led 0 to 1 product launches. His resume is really long. But one of the things that I particularly enjoy listening to, or at least learning about him, was also his work at Airbnb, where he managed dozens of stakeholders across multiple teams. So the typical combination of data, storytelling, getting buy-in, and working on very, very critical business products. And ultimately, he's also well known for being the person who decided right before an IPO, we're going to redesign the checkout, one of the most important flows of a business. And all of these things come together and culminate. And Ryan also has an MBA from UC Berkeley School of Business. So I was not kidding when I said, if you want to learn business from a designer who has that experience from real world, he's your person. So yeah, welcome to the show, Ryan, again.
Awesome.
And there are so many things that we could begin to talk about. But ultimately, one of the things that we found is when we look at the landscape of business today, there is a non-stop changing expectation for designers and the need to diversify your skill sets a lot. There's like so many blurring lines between design and other disciplines. And yeah, there's just so much. You think about products and design, you need to think about design and coding and design and marketing and design and so many other things, right? In your experience, when you look at the landscape, I'm curious to know what skills specifically are becoming incredibly crucial when you look at 2025 and beyond that. And how do we begin to think about the next phase of evolution for designers? What can you realistically begin to develop where the skills are concerned?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question to start with. The way I think about skills are there's tactical skills and strategic skills. And I believe that designers, we have a tendency to overemphasize or focus on the tactical skills. We really want to learn more tools. We want to go deeper into our process, deeper into our craft. And I think that's a huge part of who we are and what we do. But I think we do focus on it too much, to the exclusion sometimes of other skills. So I think those tactical skills are becoming more important. They're still important, especially things like, learning how to use AI to supercharge your design process, learning how to use AI tools to start getting into coding. Those are the tactical skills that I would focus on now with the way the industry is shifting. My focus is on helping designers move away from just the tactical work, which I think we emphasize too much. We go too deep into, and that strategic side is the piece that we're typically missing. That is the piece that helps other stakeholders understand us better. So it's intimidating for designers to hear you should learn business because that's kind of a catch-all category. And so when I think about the strategic skills that designers need to learn, it's not business, it's more specific in terms of business strategy, product strategy, negotiation, sales, marketing, and especially product management. Those are the areas that I really encourage designers to go investigate further because it's going to give them a broader perspective on the work they're already doing.
Yeah, I think that's really spot on, right, Ryan? And I think I remember one of the talk that David Hang gave in the last year Arch conference when he talked about the concept called design and blank, right? He was talking about designers not just focusing on just the core design whole thing, right? It's talking about designers being able to also dive into other aspect of product or of a business to say. So, and you talked about designers not just focusing on design skills, the marketing side, sales side. So can you sort of elaborate on that a little bit? And if you could give an example, probably from your hand, how you as a designer been able to combine a design expertise with another field successfully, and how can other designers also emulate that?
Yeah, I mean, it was great. I actually got to see David give that talk in Berlin at the Hatch conference over the fall, and then got to follow up with him and talk to him a little bit after the conference and after he gave that talk. And it really resonated with me because I've always considered myself somewhat of a hybrid. When I first got into design, I started doing freelance. And so for me, design was always combined with business in some way. It was never just design on its own. It was, I'm doing design work for clients, and I'm finding clients, and I'm selling those clients, and I'm shipping for them, and I'm trying to get more referrals. There was a lot of business and growth strategy involved in the freelance work that I was doing. So what David was kind of saying was the idea that as designers, we develop a pretty wide variety of skills just doing the work and being around other people who are doing different types of work when you're embedded in a team. Reflecting back on my career, I've picked up really interesting skills along the way. I've learned more about operational efficiency from DoorDash, or product quality from Airbnb, or how to sell and market something from Salesforce. Along the way, I've learned all of these skills by being in those cultures and being immersed in that way of thinking and doing business. And so it's the idea that gives designers in their careers a lot more flexibility to do different types of things than even we realize. That we can use those types of skills to solve design problems, that we could pivot to another role entirely, or we could lead those functions. And in David's experience, he actually was leading marketing teams, which was kind of his plus. He's a designer, but he's got a kind of background and other interest in marketing. And so that's what he took on. I think every designer probably has a plus something else. I am more of the maybe product leader. I've always been kind of the hybrid design plus product person, where I want to ship something that's great for customers. I want to talk to them. I want to deliver on a high degree of craft, but I also want to know what we're shipping is the right thing, and that shipping it in this sequence is the right thing to do. So I've always been very product oriented. And if I were to move in that direction, I'd probably be a hybrid product leader, design leader. Or now I've kind of got my MBA, I moved into more entrepreneurship and I'm running my own business. And so I think it's great for designers to think more broadly about our identity. I think designers often can get insular about our identity as designers, and we kind of miss other business opportunities or other job opportunities that we actually could handle really well because we've picked up these skills and we have really interesting and unique ways of solving problems.
Oh, I love that. And honestly, that just ties directly into the state of the job market today, which we can all agree is bonkers and completely.
Yeah, that's a polite word for it. Yeah.
I had a different word in mind and I decided to just go the polite route. It's completely hilarious, right? And everything you've said, right? Especially that designers have one thing that if we just look critically perhaps at our experience and the way we've just gone through different roles, perhaps we will find that extra. So with that in mind, what advice would you then give to designers who might be feeling uncertain about their next career path or unsure of what direction to even take in, especially the rate at which the landscape is evolving? There are things around the concept of like smaller, leaner teams that can do more, right? Which is the best recipe for businesses. Like if you can get less people doing more work, absolutely, let's do that. So yeah, what would be your advice?
Yeah, I think that tracks well, and I've seen that as well. I was reflecting on this a year ago, and it's ended up playing out this way, that when a market contracts, businesses want to become more efficient, and they want to get more for their spend. That's typically how startups behave all the time, is the idea that we're going to hire 5 people, and each of those 5 people can do 10 different jobs. And when I was at DoorDash, it was less than 100 people when I started, and we were designers. I was a designer. I did PM work. I was on support calls sometimes. You just did whatever it took. And I think what we're seeing is, when a market contracts, bigger companies start behaving more like smaller companies and they want more from more people. So I think the kind of key theme here is diversification, the concept from finance. So you don't put all your eggs in one basket. And that's where I see designers struggling the most right now is we're like, we're super good at Figma and that's my role and that's my job. And I'm going to stick to that lane. If Figma goes away, that's why when Figma was getting acquired, everyone was freaking out. It's because so much of what we think we do is about this one tool. That's a really risky position to be in because if the market shifts or the tool goes away, you're kind of left hanging. And so I'm a big believer in diversification. Let's kind of develop those other skills. Sometimes we are developing those skills. We just haven't acknowledged them. Acknowledge them, develop them further. And that's going to just make us more nimble in our careers. Especially with AI, I've been reflecting on this. I'm very happy that I went and got my MBA. I don't recommend it for everyone. It's not the right thing to do, but it was the right thing for me. But if design were just to go away, or the way designers are used, or the number of designers that are used in a business were to shift dramatically, I have a bunch of other skills now. I could just leave design entirely and go run a coffee shop if I wanted to. I could do something completely different, and I have some skill sets to do that confidently. So I think that is the first thing. That diversification can lead to a lot of confidence and a little more security because you've got multiple paths forward, whichever direction the industry heads. So I think that's the first thing that it's good to acknowledge and lean into. When it comes down to what specifically, I think there's no right answer. It really just depends on what are you interested in? What are you good at? What excites you? That's not just design, or is design adjacent? So about a year and a half ago, I left a startup that was just not the right fit for me. And I really paused. I took some time off. I went traveling with my family for 5 weeks in Europe. And so I had a chance to reset and really think about what I wanted. And I actually made myself a flow chart. And you do this if you study microeconomics, this is a way to make decisions, flow chart it out and say like, do I stay in design? Yes or no? If I stay in design, am I in-house or not? Yes or no? And I created 8 different options for myself of what I could feasibly do. Do I move into product management, design in-house, design as an agency, run my own agency, listed as many ideas as I could. And ruled out some. I'm like, no, that doesn't sound like the right fit for me. I'm just not interested in that. And came up with 3 options. And then I tested all 3. I came up with business consulting, kind of thought leadership work, or in-house opportunities. I interviewed for in-house opportunities and didn't like anything I saw. I did some business consulting and it wasn't my favorite. And then I landed on thought leadership. And that's kind of the area I've done the teaching and coaching that I'm doing now came as a result of that exercise. So designers are fantastic at brainstorming. Apply all your same design skills and think about your career that way. And then run an experiment. The same thing you would do in product. Those same practices apply. That's how I found my, kind of new direction for now, and been super happy with it. But it's through that kind of rigorous approach, which should feel very familiar and accessible to designers.
You found PMF.
Yeah, exactly. That was going to be my follow-up question. Like, oh, but what of the ones who have so many multifaceted skills and are just stewing in trying to figure out, okay, now I know myself and I know the things that I want, but I don't know which one to go with. But you've already answered that. Like, flow chart it out. Use your design skills. And apply it to yourself. It's not just
and then run an experiment, right? Why
exactly.
That's scary is because you don't have complete data, and you'll never have complete data, right? And so the idea that these things seem interesting to me, let's go in a lightweight way. Think about building a product. You're going to launch an MVP. You're not just going to launch the whole thing from the beginning. You're going to see how that goes and how it feels, how it works at scale. Designers can do the same thing. Just take an iterative approach, dip your toe in a couple different pools, see which one seems right, and then keep going down that path. And for me, if at any point I want to go just get a job, the skills I've gained through this experience, I think would help me do that. So it's not like I'm on this path forever and I can't back up. I can't do something else. I can't pivot. I'm not locked in. So I think people get afraid of if they make a move, they're stuck there forever. And then it all becomes very overwhelming and you have to commit fully to everything. And then you're stuck. And it's just like, that's just not the case,
Yeah, absolutely. And like the concept of experimenting, I subscribe to that like wholeheartedly. First of all, it's what I do my day to day, but just the way I think about my career, that's the way I map things out. Like the past 3 roles I have had have been experiments. And one, it's, I think, mostly to also learn about myself and figure out, is this the right kind of role for me? Exactly what you laid out. And it's also like the size of the company as well. It was something I experimented with, done a very small startup, on a massive brand or group of brands, and now in one place that's like in between. And I'm comparing all the data across that to then be able to make a better informed decision. And so you're never really stuck in one thing. You also have to just open up your mind a bit more, perhaps beyond what, like form those hypotheses and try to explore and see where that leads you.
Yeah, I mean, and if I'm going to also add a bit to that, like from what Ryan really said, and I think it's really what he said about even when you try out something like right now, is not sort of stuck to that particular career path right now. You could pivot, and even what experience you've gained in this particular right now, it's also useful whatsoever you want to use it for your next adventure, so which is something that I think I'm really holding on to. Right. So the concept of freelancing and building side hustle, it's something that I know you've done, and from what you said, you've experimented with different paths. What are the key advantage of pursuing this path, and from your perspective, like what are the advantage for us to be able to do those things as a designer?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, let me preface this with saying I'm not a big believer in hustle for hustle's sake. Anytime that I have doubled up or tripled up on the number of things that I'm doing, it was for a very strategic reason that I saw paying off in future years. It was for me, not for other people. I think a couple main points come up for me in thinking about doing more than one thing at a time and how do you handle that. The first, again, is diversification, right? If you are working a full-time job at a company that's raising money, if they don't raise money, but you've got some freelance side hustle going, then like a project or two, a little bit, just something, then if you get laid off or something were to happen, which many people have experienced recently, you've got something else already there, and you can just, yeah, exactly. You can sustain that. You could scale that. What I see happen with designers, especially with job search, and I've helped some people in the last year, is when you don't have any other kind of revenue coming in, then you start to feel more desperate. And that's just as human nature. It's really scary when you're like watching your money dwindle away and it's like being a startup. You've got a runway and that runway is diminishing. It gets scary. And so any kind of revenue is going to help extend that runway. And what really just comes back down to is then leverage for whatever next job you ultimately would want to take, right? You don't have to just take anything because you're about to run out of money. A little bit more money is going to help you be able to be a little bit pickier and find something that's better for your career. So I do think it's valuable. I was a full-time student while running my business and being doing full-time freelance. And when the most extreme moment for me was I was at Airbnb leading a team to redesign one of the most complicated surfaces while earning my MBA from Berkeley. Then COVID hit, and then I had a child. So I was at Airbnb with the MBA during the pandemic and a baby all at the same time. And I found that doing those things serves something larger for yourself. Like the MBA, I knew was something that would be really good for me 5 years later, and I was really committed to doing it. You can find ways to manage your time. I drink a lot of coffee. You can stay up late. You can get up early. You can make the time for a short window. If it serves a larger purpose, I've found it's amazing how much you can expand. And so I don't, like I said, believe in this like long sustained hustle because that's what you need to do. But if it's for something strategic to make your life better in a year or 3 years or 5 years, then am I going to spend a year and it's going to be really hard for a year, but then that period is over and I've got something to show for it? I'm a big believer in that.
I know you talked about you drinking a lot of coffees, right? And having to be under a lot of hustle and bustle, right? But can you share some of the nuance? Like, what are those practical tips of managing the demand for a designer? You subscribe to having a full-time job, but then having something on the side, right? What are those practical tips for you that you think a designer could be able to manage that kind of demand? It's really demanding.
Yeah, I think there's a few tips, some of which are probably, you've read online, and some which might be more specific to designers. I think when I was freelancing, the great thing about freelancing is trying to pick your clients to some degree. And so what I try to do is anyone who's going to be like emotionally draining as a client, like let's be really careful about who we work with so they don't soak up a ton of time or a ton of energy. Being pickier with your clients if you can be. If your job is super hyper demanding, can you wait for there to be a lull in that, or you change teams, or you're out of that growth period? So picking the right people, the right conditions is a huge component of it to begin with. More tactically, time blocking really carefully and dedicating time for rest are really important. So, when I was getting my MBA, I specifically got a part-time MBA from Berkeley. So I was able to do weekends and evenings. And that means, no social media, like less time watching TV, less time playing video games, these kinds of things. I work 8 hours a day and then I have 16 other hours. So I'm probably getting less sleep and I'm doing less things that I don't get a lot of value out of, or I get medium value out of. So I started just becoming really deliberate with what do I really want to do right now? And is it kind of doom scroll on Reddit or Facebook, or should I, watch a movie for 45 minutes and then go do something productive? Like really try to concentrate and think consciously about the time that I'm spending in rest. Am I doing something that actually fulfills me? Or I'm making some kind of conscious choice about what that is. And then, doing some block of work on this other kind of initiative, whether it's a half hour or 3 hours, sometimes just doing some is better than doing none. And I think that a lot of times people think, if you have a side hustle, it's going to consume all of your free time. It doesn't have to. And some days it might. You might have a crunch period and some days it's going to take a lot of time. Some days you might not do any work on that thing and you might just rest. And so there's a lot of variability, and you can kind of design for that to make sure you're getting rest and trying to maintain balance. So I think time blocking, be really conscious. One thing I figured out was to not kind of half work and half play, don't work and watch a movie at the same time. It's just go enjoy the movie and then do an hour of concentrated work after or something like that, right? Because I felt like whenever I split my attention in half work and half play, I wasn't really getting the best of either. And so that was something that really helped me. I'm going to hard context switch from I'm in Airbnb mode. Now I'm going to take a break and hang out with my wife. And now I'm going to be in MBA study mode. And then I'm going to go to sleep. Just making sure there's hard transitions between those things. So I'm really kind of changing my mindset from one thing to another. Just helped me be more efficient with the time that I had. And then the more efficient I was, the more I was able to get done and the better balance I had.
Oh my God. I can relate hard, but I also feel like I only experienced a tiny fraction of it because MBA is not long. How long was your MBA?
It was a 3-year program.
My goodness. Wow. 3 years. That is some serious level of commitment. Yeah. I only did the MBA for 6 weeks. Honestly, to be fair, I see, the content of it also was very much pulling from MBA stuff. So, but I think it's that it's the level of focus because it's condensed. Then you have weekly assignments. That's what made it feel like so much pressure. But I can't even imagine 3 years, Ryan. That's impressive. Well done. Seriously.
One thing that I'll say about that though is you develop skills, right?
True.
I think with the MBA, I realized only after that you're learning all the skills. You're going really deep. And so, the program you described as 6 weeks, I would spend 10 weeks just studying statistics while I'm also studying marketing, while I'm also studying people management. And so you're really going deeper on a really wide variety of things. One thing that I didn't realize I was learning in that program was all of these different professors are sending you so many pages of readings and so many assignments and group assignments. And when I studied statistics, we would learn something, and then the next weekend we'd have an exam on it. And every Saturday we had an exam on the thing we had just learned. So you had to just get really good at operating really quickly, understanding things really quickly, managing your time really well. It was kind of like a forcing function for managing your time. And so coming out of that, year one was really difficult because you're learning all those time management skills. Year 2 and 3 got a lot easier because you could pick classes that play to your strengths a little bit or play to your interests, and you know how to do this. You've gained those skills. And so that's why I'm a big believer in you kind of have to get through that pain point, that first period of time, that first year is going to be really challenging because you're doing something new and you don't have any idea how to do it. And then year 2 and 3, it changes because you've developed a really strong foundation. And now you just get to play off of that foundation versus developing it, which is a totally different thing. So it somehow gets easier if you do it for longer and you go, it's not 6 weeks, because that 6 weeks is you do it, you're done, you're out. If you do it for 3 years, you can't just work harder. You have to work smarter to be able to sustain that amount of time.
Agreed. Agreed. Okay. I see a direct thread between everything you've just described and actually running a business. No, seriously. Because first go around when I had my agency, the first year I'll say easily was the hardest because of all of these ramp up skills that you needed to figure out. I was also when I started the agency, I was a new mom. So it was in the middle of a pandemic and my daughter was should probably just turned one when I was like, oh, this is a great time to just start a business, right? So for designers, thank goodness we're out of the pandemic, but it doesn't make it any less easier. And there are so many tools, there are so many things to figure out with like setting up your freelance business for success and things like that. There's tax. Emmanuel's dealing with that right now. Um, there's all sorts of things, right? There's legal, there's so many things, marketing, sales. All there are so many challenges. Are there unique ones that you want to mention? But beyond all that as well, how do you think designers can approach scaling through that first year and then thinking long term from the beginning so that you can begin to build a fulfilling freelance career or business, however long or short that is?
Yeah, I think you do have to do all of those things. You need to pay your taxes. Please pay your taxes. It is not fun. And the thing is, you're going to try a bunch of different things and you still can dial those things up or dial those things down, right? Maybe if you could either do your taxes yourself and that would save you some money, or you could spend a little money and have someone do your taxes for you. Maybe the first year you do it yourself because, the business hasn't scaled that much and it's pretty easy, it's cost effective. Year 2, the game's changed, you're doing more revenue, you decide to pay someone else to do it. So your relationship to these different tasks that you have to do, sales, marketing, negotiation, product development, product delivery, financial analysis, operations, taxes, these types of things, year 1 is going to look very different. Some of those things you might not do at all. You'd be like, I know I should do some, competitive analysis. Doesn't need to start with that. You could do that 6 months from now. Maybe marketing or product development or user research is the right thing to start with. So I would say, think about it like a PM. Identify the pieces that you will probably have to handle. Look where you can make things easier on yourself. Look where you can push things back. You don't have to do it all necessarily at the same time. Taxes are something you have to do quarterly or once a year, depending on your situation. So, I think one of the biggest skills for me is just looking at those kinds of different units of work. Like I've got my marketing track, my product development track, my financial analysis and tax track, and then I'll sequence them and not try to do them all at the same time. It's just too difficult. And then seeing, okay, this year I did it this way, next year, how can I make that more efficient and easier on myself? And certainly running my own business now for about 1.5 years, the first 6 months are just crazy. I describe it, if anyone in the audience has kids, I didn't really understand this until I had children. It's you don't know what you're doing for the first 6 months. If you have a baby, you're like, I'm just trying to keep this thing alive. I have no idea what's going on. You've got absolutely no skills. You cannot operationalize or make this thing more efficient. But then you develop some skills. And then, the second 6 months is different. And then the next year is different. And you kind of get some routines. And then if you have another kid, you're like, well, I've already kind of done some of these things before. And I, know how to handle some certain situations, or I at least know what to expect. So I think, don't try to do all of it all at the same time. Don't try to do all of it at 110%. Figure out where you can dial things up, dial things down, and sequence things to make your life a little bit easier. Just as general best practices has helped me a lot.
Yeah, I think that will amount to don't work too hard, work smart, right? Don't overwork yourself. And looking at, there's a popular trend right now. We hear the word fractional head of growth, fractional designer, fractional
Everything.
You said?
It's fractional everything at this point.
Yeah, literally, everything is being fractional. I see it like advanced freelancing. I don't know. That's what I see. Sort of they don't want to call it it's freelancing, but I don't know if you could explain what does that really means. And I know it's getting a lot of traction, right? I hardly check 2 or 3 LinkedIn profile. I'll see fractional head of growth, fractional designer, blah blah blah. But what does that really mean, and what's the potential application of this to the future of design work, leaning between full time and being fractional?
Yeah, I think so. I've not done fractional work myself. I know people who have, and I know people who have started businesses connecting companies to fractional leaders. The way I think about it is that it's somewhere between like being a freelance contractor, which is very transactional, to being a full-time employee. If you think about freelance contractor as dating and full-time employee is married, it's like long-term relationship. It's like in the middle, but you're not quite married and committed to each other yet, but you spend a lot of time together. I think it's especially true in the leadership space. When I hear the term freelance or contractor, I'm thinking someone who comes in and does like a very tactical project and then they're kind of out. Fractional, I think, usually represents a degree of seniority, and this person's coming into kind of leading a team or helping the business in a really key strategic sort of way. I think there's a lot of pros to this approach. It makes sense. Like if you're a experienced leader and you want to just kind of work part-time for whatever reasons, that's really accessible. If someone also like getting married is a big commitment, if you want to kind of like not hitch your wagon to one company and be like, this is the company I'm going to make all my wealth at and get that equity and stuff, that may or may not work out. So you can kind of hedge your bets by working with a couple different companies. And what's great for the companies is if they may not be ready to like hire a full-scale design team or a VP of design, but they still know that design's important and they want design to be represented in the company earlier in the stages. It gives them a way to bring design into the company at an earlier stage and kind of start infusing those ideas and ways of working, even if they're not ready to hire a full-on VP or something or scale a team. So really, I like it in the sense that it's kind of try before you buy for both design leaders and the companies. The cons are there's less commitment overall, and it can make the relationship more transactional. But I think there's a lot of pros to this. And it makes a lot of sense when companies are trying to still move forward with design, but they're being cost conscious because the market's contracted. People are just getting creative about what the roles are. They're getting creative about how designers meet businesses. Everyone's looking for a solution, and this is an interesting way that people have tried to solve those problems.
Okay. The advice, go learn business, we can all agree is annoying. Like, saying it that way, like, oh yeah, designers need to learn business. Don't get me started. But at the heart of it, the intention behind that statement is actually everything we've talked about. Markets oftentimes dictate how businesses react and how hiring practices evolve. And one thing that's not going away anytime soon is that designers are going to need to figure out how to articulate ROI of their work, business value of their work. And there have been so many LinkedIn thought leadership posts on this.
Half of them are from me, probably. So.
No, that's it. So thing, yours are practical, okay? So at least there are actual takeaways. I think the ones that grind my nerves are the ones that are just like, okay, great. Thank you for highlighting all the problems. Now, what should people do?
Yeah.
Those are the ones that I just cannot get. Now, what are some practical strategies, right, that designers can use to measure and communicate the ROI of design? You have a course.
Yeah.
That's literally based on this. And that's how I actually came in contact with you. And I took that course and I was like, now, especially when for some people, their experiences, they don't even have access to traditional metrics. Like that is not your business as a designer. You don't touch the data. You don't access it. How do you showcase this business value if every single company is now starting to say, hey, where are the metrics in your portfolio before we even have a conversation with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. The first place I start is actually a negotiation tactic. And I think this is really critical, where when people are asking about the ROI of design, that's a very difficult thing to answer. ROI is something really specific. It's if we invest X dollars, like what number of dollars do we get back out of something? That's a really appropriate question to ask on some kind of project where you can isolate variables. Like everyone thinks about A/B testing. We work in product teams. A/B testing is great because you isolate every other variable and you're just looking at the button color changes from this to this, isolating everything else, what happens. Then you can come up with a specific number. Be like, if you really had to, it took us 47 minutes to change that button color and it produced X dollar value. Therefore, it was worth this much effort or something, right? The problem is that doesn't work. proving that causal relationship doesn't work when you have too many variables. And if you study statistics, you don't A/B test when you have a bunch of different variables. You do a regression analysis. You look at the high degree of correlation between two variables and you try to consider them. And so designers get hung up, if we get pushed in this framing of what's the ROI, firstly, that's not the right question. And then we react to it by trying to answer that wrong question and we get stuck. And so the first thing I try to do is reframe this. And I think designers can handle this because it's what you do in user research. In user research, someone says, I need feature X. You don't just go build feature X. That's bad practice. What you do is say, cool, tell me why, help me understand. Let's talk about the big picture. And you're trying to get at their underlying motivation. So I think in business school, you're taught to ask questions like, what is the ROI of XYZ, whatever thing, whether it's appropriate or not. And product teams especially are like, well, we do A/B testing all the time. Why don't we have data for, how valuable design function as a team of people is? And it's just not the right question. And so what I try to work with designers and I try to work with business people on is what they're really getting at is what is the business value of design? What does this get me? If I have designers around, how does this help me? That becomes a little more accessible because it's not just about data and it's not just about a causal relationship. We can start to talk about the correlation of things and we can start to expand away from data and think about evidence, right? So a lot of times designers are like, well, unless I did an A/B test and I've got data, how do I talk about the value of my work? In a business sense, when you're coming up with a business strategy, before you've built anything, you have to collect evidence that this is the right thing to do. You look at the competition, you look at the overall market direction, you look at industry benchmarks or product benchmarks within your own company. You look at a really wide variety of data sources and you think about the business value of something. Do we move this? Are we adding financial value to the business, making the business more operationally efficient? Are we improving our culture so our team is more cohesive? We have a higher degree of ownership and people come up with more interesting solutions? Is the team growing and learning and adapting? These are all things you care about as a manager that you can't pinpoint specific numbers on all the time, but they do matter. And so that's one thing I try to encourage designers to do is, one, if someone says ROI of design, let's extrapolate out away from that. Acknowledge that the question of what do I get from designers, if I invest in design, what do I get as a result, is a completely legitimate question because you're asking someone to hire more people or promote them or do these types of things. And honestly, in business school, you don't learn about design. These people have not been trained on what that is. So that question can come from a really curious and positive point, like help me understand. The problem is designers are often not in that position to really even answer that question if we make it more accessible. And so that's where I try to say, let's talk about other types of business value besides just product value. And let's talk about not just a causal relationship, but a high degree of correlation between things, because that's not the right question to ask. And can we think about then, if I'm proposing a specific feature, do I think it's going to move conversion? Yeah. Does it also help us in a bunch of other ways? Yeah. So let's try to think about the value of our work a little more holistically. And then that's what tends to work for people. The bar is not, I think designers are afraid that the bar is super high, that we have to have a perfect number to say our value. And what I've experienced with a lot of designers I've trained is that as soon as they just start speaking about business a bit more, start talking about the business more holistically or our goals more holistically, actually outside of just product metrics, it actually gets C-suite executives really excited because they're not thinking about just product metrics. They're thinking about the big picture too. So if you can level up to that, abstract the conversation out a little bit, the pressure to have a perfect number or a calculation for anything is actually a lot less and can be more compelling.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yes. As you were speaking, I remembered something from the course that was one of the ways in which my mind also opened up. And it's also something else that linked to my DDMBA course. Anyway, the way I think about hypothesis pre coming to the course, right? And then also how do you talk about when you do have access to metrics, for example, how do you talk about it? And how do you ladder up the metrics that you're talking about? And I think prior to your course, it was more just, we're thinking about the metrics according to, it's this is our hypothesis, this is the business metrics, and it ends there. And then you added on a layer of financial understanding on top of that. If you Don't just end the statement here, go a step further and link it up to actual evidence of money. And just talking that way also helps. That's what you said about the C-suite getting excited about it, because that's the language they understand, right? It's the money aspect. So anyway, all of that is to also just ask, like, so in this course, ROI of Design, and you have a number of other courses as well, which we'll get into detail in a bit. What are some of the key principles that you emphasize in the ROI of Design course, and the common misconceptions that designers have about the business side of design?
Yeah, I think that, going back to the last question, thinking about ROI, when we frame things a certain way, or we think about things a certain way, it starts to make it feel very inaccessible. Well, they're asking about ROI and I don't have perfect data, I'm stuck. Right? And so we have to get ourselves unstuck. And so that's the first thing that's really important, is starting to expand our thinking so we have multiple different ways we can tell our story. You just brought up something really interesting, which is the C-suite cares about the financial outcomes. And that's good. Like, we need to have profit. It's kind of the lifeblood of the company. If you don't have profit, your company dies. It runs out of blood. We don't want to do that. It's completely valid to, use that metric as a proxy for company health, because we're going to be able to bring more of our product. We're going to hire more people. We're all not going to get laid off. Like, it's a good thing. It's difficult. Designers feel very far removed from profit. There's a couple things we can do to kind of get ourselves a little bit closer and start talking about our work in a way that other people get excited about. And by the way, that bar is not that high. To get people excited, to get executives excited about the work you're doing, designers are not expected to think this way or work this way at all. I actually had a head of design who I worked with who took my course, and he started talking more about analytics, and his CTO said to him, I didn't know designers worked or thought this way. People just don't expect it from designers. And so if you start doing it, there's kind of like a double take, like, what did you just say about metrics and finances? But they're excited about that. And so really the bar isn't that high. You just start talking in this way, and there's a shift, a perception shift of like, oh, you actually care about the same things we care about. And so that's the first thing, is aligning to other people's priorities. This is user research again, understanding other people's world, other people's incentives, what they care about, and saying, here's how I'm going to help you with the things you care about. I think the design industry has made some mistakes in terms of always trying to sell people on our things. Like, here's design thinking as a product, or here's design metrics. Start thinking about these design metrics. I've seen design leaders like start inventing metrics, and then you have to go educate people on those things and try to help them understand why they should buy your product, instead of just saying, what do you care about? Conversion? Here's how I help conversion. You care about sales? Here's how I help sales. That's a much better, like, faster path. The thing about financial numbers and influence is scary to designers is we feel far removed from it. But what's great is if you show other teams that you care about their priorities, they become your partners in that process. So if I'm going to the product team and saying, here's how I think I can influence conversion, they know the relationship between conversion and sales and conversion and profits. Or I go to my marketing team and I say, I think I can make your campaigns more effective. They understand the relationship between a more effective campaign and dollars. Those business teams are much closer to profit, and they have that muscle built. So if we develop good relationships with them, we can get them excited with our work, develop that relationship. They can help us tell the story. They can help us fill in those gaps that we might not feel very comfortable with. The other piece that's missing here, where designers get kind of stuck with the idea of, well, I did design work, how does it come up to these metrics? Whatever those metrics are, product metrics like conversion, other metrics like NPS or operational efficiency. What matters is designers are changing users' behaviors. Whenever you like move a button from left to right, someone has to do something differently. And every time we run an A/B test, we're assessing the degree in which human behavior changed. And every time you're designing something, you're thinking about, if someone can read this easier, if I change information architecture or change the hierarchy, if I make this button bigger, does it become more visible? Someone's going to see it when they didn't see it, and they're going to click on it differently. We're always thinking about how we're going to affect the user. How the user then behaves based on our change is what shows up in those metrics. So if I make a design more modern, we might talk about our design in that way. Say, my design's more modern. What does that really mean for the user? Maybe it means I trust your product more. If they trust our product more, what would that mean for the business? maybe they like it better. NPS goes up. Maybe they refer people. Maybe retention goes up because they stick around. Maybe they use the product more and the number of daily active users goes up. So designers absolutely influence human behavior and emotions and attitudes. And then those attitudes and emotions and behaviors are what we end up collecting in the metrics. So I think there's a multi-step process, but if you can think about how you're affecting the user and then work with business teams to think about how the user's behavior change affects the things that they're measuring, and they work with you on that, and then they can help you tell that financial story, it actually gets a lot easier to do this kind of threading from I launched design system to it produced X number, of dollars at the end.
Wow, that's a lot to take. I love all the layers of it, honestly, and there's a lot to unpack there. So the thread I would like to pull now is what you said about the minute the partners realize that you care about the same things they care about, then the perceptions change around you, right? And what we unfortunately have seen with designers is our tendency to stay within our enclosures and our bubble and be focused on XYZ. Yeah. And then, like you said, we then package it and say, oh, they're the ones who need to learn design thinking. They're the ones who need to. But there is already so much going on. Like, design is not, let's just say it, it's not the most important function in a business. It can contribute massively to the business, but it's not the most important. Now, I mean, we've seen businesses that run completely without design teams, right? But ultimately, when we begin to rethink these perspectives, how can designers then better, like, first of all, yes, go talk to the stakeholders, but then how do you begin to tailor your communication as well, right? So that as you're learning whose success is tied to yours and vice versa, how does my communication then begin to reflect or resonate with the business objectives?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the first thing is just ask. Like when you're working on a new project, just show curiosity and do, again, more research, understand why are we even doing this? Where is this coming from? Is this ladder up to a larger business strategy? Is this to hit a specific type of success metric? There were so many times that I was assigned some project. I've been so guilty of this. I'm like, cool, got it, design new interface. And I just jump into wireframing or jump into things. And I didn't think to ask about what am I doing and why does it matter? And just even starting to ask some of those questions is a really great place to start. One thing that's going to do is it's going to develop rapport and develop that relationship, that trust with people, because they're like, all right, Ryan knows why we're doing this. He cares about the big picture and he's got some context. So everything he proposes, I know he's bringing that context into it because he sat down, asked me, and I explained it to him, and I know he understands it. So everything I then say to that person, they're going to listen to a higher degree because they know I've taken the time to understand what's going on. In that initial conversation, I've also started to understand like those why reasons. Okay, why is this goal? Oh, because the business is raising money. Okay, well, why that? Oh, because we need to hit conversion. Why this? I can get a sense of the big picture. There's sometimes projects that require you to work with multiple different teams. And so I repeat that process. I say, okay, what does the marketing team think about this? What does the sales team think about this project? One of the biggest projects I did was at DoorDash, and they wanted photography, food photography in the consumer app. And they said, Ryan, here's a $250,000 budget. Go make this happen. So I had no team. I had some resources, but I had like no team. And it wasn't just design photos into the app. It was go source all of the photography. And so I started on that project. And again, was totally guilty of not asking the bigger pictures. I just started like, all right, how are the photos going to look? How are we going to talk to the merchants? How are we going to find photographers? And I started showing the results of our initial test shoots to the teams and to the companies and like all hands. And then the sales team would come to me afterward and say, this is awesome. It's going to help us in these ways. And the marketing team would say, this is awesome. It's going to help us in these ways. And I accidentally became aware of what those teams cared about, what their priorities were, what they were held accountable for delivering, and how I can make their lives easier and help them do all of those things. So I've learned to now be more deliberate in that process, saying, here's what I have in mind. What do you guys think? How is this going to help you? They will tell you if it's helpful, and if it is helpful, how it's helpful and in what ways it's helpful. And then every time I have a conversation with that team, that's what I'm going to focus on. marketing team cares about this. I'm going to tell the story of this work to them in the way that they've already described earlier on, that it's really useful to them. And I'm going to change my narrative with sales. I'm going to change my narrative with product, because the product team doesn't care if the marketing campaigns are more efficient, but they really care if it's going to increase conversion in some way. So that's the story I'm going to tell to them. Same project. It just means different things to different people. And I'm just going to adapt the narrative, knowing what people care about, because I've asked them upfront.
Well, that's a whole lot that you've really shared. There's a whole lot to unpack in there. And I want to just turn the table around, right? Now, we've sort of been dwelling about ROI of design. That's more of like when a designer is working in-house as a designer, how you could really communicate that as a designer, telling the story based on whichever team you're working for, telling them the advantage, right? Let's turn it around and talk about for in terms of career strategy, when as a designer you want to get into that job specifically. In your experience, right? I know the job market is
bonkers, I think the word was.
Yeah. So, but right now, I think everything boils around communication, storytelling, and that's kind of where I want to drive us to. You've been talking about, okay, you need to talk about how this really impacts a particular team. That's when you're in-house. Now, when you're outside trying to join the team, you're right, you have the technical skills, you have the craft, right? But I've seen designers struggle, and someone is guilty of that, of communicating the impact at that point or what you could potentially offer to them. They've seen that you could do this work, right? So are there tactics other than strategy that a designer could use to strategically approach how to communicate their value that they could have to a business in the view of getting a job?
Yeah, so this starts with a lot of things we've covered already, right? And all of the skills that I'm talking about are baseline sales and marketing and kind of negotiation skills, right? Understanding, if we think about ourselves or our work as a product we're trying to sell, we want to understand our customer so we can tell them this is why this will help you, right? It aligns to what that person cares about. That's true in-house, and it's true of someone trying to hire you. So the two things I recommend from a strategic standpoint, because again, if there's a difference between tactics and strategy, designers so often focus on tactics. Like, I'm not getting a job. I need to go into my portfolio and revise my portfolio, or I need to tweak the work itself, or I need to tweak my storytelling. Those are all great tactics. The first thing I recommend to people is they be more targeted in their approach of which businesses they're applying to. So you want to think about, if you're starting a company, you don't try to create a product that is sellable to everyone. You want to identify your target audience, right? So if I've never worked in, medicine, I've never worked in medicine, I'm probably not the best fit to go work at a tech startup in the medical space, right? Especially in this industry, or this market. Maybe 10 years ago, people were like, yeah, but you're a designer, fine. You'll fit right in. It's not enough now. You need to show that you have delivered outcomes for people in the way we're describing, in a way that they can really understand how it's going to work for them. And you want to minimize the gap for them. They're like, if you've done this exact project successfully at another company who's in our exact industry, I'm pretty confident you're going to be able to do that with us. And so I think designers are often not targeted enough. They're like, FANG companies, well-known companies. It's like, that is too broad. Like, two well-known companies like Netflix and Facebook might be just completely doing different things, facing different challenges as a business. They're at different stages of their business. They need different types of outcomes. They're worried about totally different things. So trying to sell yourself to two completely different types of companies becomes really challenging for you. It's going to waste a ton of time and energy, and you're not going to be able to tailor that message to them as effectively. So the first thing I recommend is being more targeted, looking at the types of problems you've solved, the types of industries you've worked in, the types of stages of companies. If you're like, I've worked only at startups and now I want to go work at a huge corporation, that's a huge shift. Those businesses work totally differently. So look for those commonalities and target the right thing. And then, using some of the skills we talked about earlier, what might a growth stage company in AI be needing right now? It's a really competitive space. We just got DeepSeek showed up this week. Like, everyone's freaking out. Like, you can start to think about what those businesses might be facing, what they're thinking about, what the product problems are, but also what the business problems are. So you can kind of start to hypothesize. Let's be a little more specific. And it's like creating a persona, right? We've done a little bit of research, desk research. We're starting to think about this persona of company and what might they need. And then I'm going to start telling my story in a way that aligns to what I think that specific customer is looking to buy. And so then, then you can talk about your impact. You can talk about metrics you hit. You can talk about how you rallied teams, created a more collaborative culture, set the company up for success longer term, or reduce debt, or any number of things that are good for a business. You can talk about all of those things as wins. But I think the first step is making sure you're kind of talking to the right customer and you've got some persona in mind, and you're not just trying to boil the ocean and apply to as many jobs as broadly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I would say most designers are guilty of that, honestly, including me, right? And yeah, and I mean, it's like a common mistake we all do, right? And I think I really like that approach instead of just making it more like a tactics, right? Just have like a well-defined strategy to help you. Like, I won't want to dive away from there, right? But I just want to talk about, are there any other common mistake apart from us just spreading our tentacles all around randomly? Are there other common mistakes you've seen designers make, especially when they're trying to get a new job?
Yeah, I think it's important. I'm actually going to be teaching a class on this. So I've got these frameworks in mind. I think it's important to think about the different types of way we show up as designers in terms of the work. So there's kind of three levers I look at if you're crafting a portfolio. There's the work itself, there's how you present the work, and then there's how you speak about the work. And so designers often focus on maybe one or two of those things, but you really need to hit all three if you're going to be really successful. And so I think not going deep enough in all three of those things. We spend so much time casting these wide nets that then we probably don't invest in developing the narrative and developing the story and developing the work and showing the work. We don't invest enough in that. And so the quality isn't as high, and the focus is too broad, and that's really a losing scenario. So in terms of being more focused allows you to invest more time then, because you're like applying to 5 companies and not 500 companies. You can invest more time in the application and really narrow it down. So you want to make sure the work is really good. One thing that I've learned is that we don't have control over everything that ships, right? PM says, we're going to cut that scope. Okay, cool. That didn't ship. You can always talk about what you would have done. You can always talk about the next step you would have liked to build, or an assumption that you didn't get to validate. You can always talk about those things in terms of making the work be more impactful and being able to polish it. Like, this is what we shipped. This is what I wanted to design. Like, let's talk about those things. In terms of presenting the work, this is where I think we talk about portfolios and on-site presentations. I do think you can show the work that emphasizes your skills the best, right? I might be like, this is some variation of what's shipped, but this is a cleaner version. I'm going to, I learned a lot at Salesforce about creating great demos to really highlight certain aspects that you want to highlight. That's completely fair. And all of those things just need to be pixel perfect. I've looked at people's decks and it's like, there's a screenshot, and every time I move forward, it moves a little bit. It's like, you got to just make sure everything is completely dialed in. And then when you talk about the work, this is the piece that people miss, the business impact of it, where it would be like, I designed this thing and look how modern it is now. That's not enough. We have to talk about the business impact. But if you pick the best projects that are going to resonate most with your target audience, you make sure that it is really, really, really dialed in in terms of how you present the work, and then you talk about it in terms of the business impact. Those are things that are really going to help you.
Oh my God. Right.
I think we already stole into his next course, and
No, absolutely. I think because I'm actually so excited because
yeah, same here.
it's all of these things that we've talked about. And I think that anyone who is job hunting right now, even though it was a different course I took, I will tell you just the level of attention and the way, I think what I enjoy the most about Ryan's courses is the fact that there is space to talk. So it's not just about taking in all of this information. You actually have sessions with Ryan where you can have conversations, really dig in deep. It's not recorded sometimes. And you can be vulnerable and just however you want it. So with a career level conversation, I think that method will be so, so important. And I highly recommend it to anyone. So let's think about it in a different way, right? There are people who might be asking themselves right now whether they even want to stay in design. We've seen designers cross over into engineering. We've seen designers switch and
PM.
become PMs. Exactly. And we've seen designers completely just quit design. And I've got a friend who is just making art, and that's it, just done. And this, there's no right or wrong path for anyone. It's your decision how there's so many factors. But for anyone who might just be evaluating right now, I'm tired of the way the industry is. It's exhausting trying to find a job. What are some of the key questions that designers should consider in thinking about what their next steps could be? And I know we've touched on this a little bit in previously, but just like, yeah, we've talked about like identifying your unique strengths and leveraging all of these things. But if you're just tired and done,
Yeah. Yeah, I think, that's a really personal question. It's a completely legitimate one. I think what's interesting about designers is we have this really strong identity as designers. Like, even as I've gotten my MBA and I've done like very product management type work, I still feel like I'm a designer. That's part of my identity. A lot of industries don't have that same identity. You're like, I and my core am an accountant. It's like not a lot of, other industries are like so deeply into it necessarily. And people traditionally change careers and change jobs and completely shift. I think it's totally fine to do that. The way I think about this is, firstly, where is this coming from? There's a couple different things. One, if you're like, look, I started in design, it's maybe just not for me. Okay, fine. Like you ran an experiment, you did this for a few years. It's not ultimately what you want to do. That's totally fine. If you're like, I am tired, also fine. Like I am kind of viewing my work right now as a kind of a palate cleanse. Like I've been in-house for more than a decade. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to run my own business for a while. I still want to be design adjacent. I'm still working with designers every day. I'm still talking to designers about design and about, product teams, but I'm not in one at the moment, which has been a really nice break. I probably will go back into one because I want to be part of the industry and I don't want to be so far removed that I like lose a step. But it's been a nice break for now. So sometimes like I totally relate to that. I'm exhausted. I need a break. There's other ways, other things you can do to be in it, but not totally in it all the time. If you're just kind of in that situation where I've applied to a lot of jobs, or I'm in this, this relationship with my PMs, and I'm just kind of tired of this, I'm a huge proponent of course, gaining new skills, gaining new perspectives, taking classes. If you still really want to be in it, but you're facing a situation that is just exhausting you, you can choose to leave, which is totally fair, or you can learn some new skills, or both, right? To say like, I'm not going to go to that type of company ever again. And when I go to my next company, I'm going to bring these new skills to the table. And I've worked with a ton of designers that are in that situation where they can reset the relationships they have by gaining some new skills, by even just talking to the PMs about those PMs metrics and incentives and what they're motivated to do and why. You can reset really difficult relationships. So, if you want to stay in, it is still a hard time. Like you can upskill. I think that's really critical. If you want to take a break, that's fine. If you want to do something else and go run a chocolate shop, awesome. I literally know someone who was in tech and just went and started a candy store. Like the world needs those too. So is there something else that you would enjoy, you want to try, you'd find really fulfilling? And this is where that side hustle idea comes back in, where you don't have to just be like, I quit design, I'm going to go start the candy shop. You could, experiment, try it in a small, do a pop-up, come up with a couple products, sell them on Etsy, see how it goes. And if it takes off and you enjoy it, run with it. If it doesn't take off or you don't enjoy it, don't run with it. So feel free to, have a side hustle or have something you're passionate about. I was just speaking to a design leader who's going to start like a grocery store. And she's like, my job is really stressful, but I'm going to have this creative outlet. And I can do both. I think that's fantastic. So, all those paths are totally valid. So that's why I come back to like, where is your head at? Because there's different ways to approach it. And it really comes down to what you feel like is right for you. But there's tools and resources for any of those different options.
oh, thank you so much for a fantastic conversation, Ryan. And I'm hoping that anyone who listens to this episode can take different lessons and learnings from it in a way that benefits them. But ultimately, I'll tie it all up together and say it's more the biggest things here are understanding how to be adaptable as a designer, the need for continuous learning, and also reaching beyond your little corner or not so little corner, and just expanding your worldview by being empathetic with our stakeholders and understanding the world from their perspectives as well. So it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also just want to talk to us about the courses you've currently got going on. Oh, fun fact is that Ryan launched
Fun fact.
courses
Is it
over
fun
the
fact or real? It's real fact.
hospital, like over the holidays, just went hard on it. And I was like, okay, Ryan's disappeared. What's going on? But yeah, talk to us about these courses and any other resources you might want to share, as well as where to find you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been launching courses on Maven for the last year and a half or so. That's the best place to find me. I've got 3 courses, and they kind of speak to designers at different stages where they're at. Everything we're talking about. There's designers who are burned out and they want to try something new. There's designers who want to try to just stay in their current role and are having a difficult time breaking through to stakeholders and helping, be used more strategically. And there's designers who want to just step up and deliver more value, and the company is looking to them to do that. So the 3 courses I teach, the first is describing the ROI of Design. It's been out for about a little over a year, and about 300 designers have taken it so far, which is huge. And it really is about how do we think about ourselves as part of the business and communicate our value in a way that non-designers understand. So that could be used in performance reviews. That could be used just to do more strategic work and have a bigger seat at the table. That could be used to find a new job. So it's extremely useful table stakes skill to be able to talk to non-designers about design in a way that they're like, aha, light bulb, I get it. I want you in the room. That's the first course. The second course I just launched a month ago, and 60 designers have taken it already, which is crazy, is a PM masterclass for designers, where it's like, look, I want to just do strategic work. I want to understand how the product development process works. I want to analyze data in a way that I am going to be able to advocate for shipping something, even if the A/B test goes south. How do I have evidence that we keep moving forward, which has been hugely beneficial in my career? How do I even find new product opportunities that my business is going to value? And you'd be like, wow, Ryan saw something that no one else saw. That was super useful. So that's my second course, PM Masterclass for Designers. And then the third course, which is coming out in March, is really about a job search and career strategy. It's what we talked about today in terms of, are we even being strategic about our job search? Are we targeting the right companies where we're going to have the path of least resistance to get a job? And then once we've identified that persona of company, we should start with targeting. Are we telling them the right message through our portfolios, through our presentations, on our LinkedIn, across all of these marketing surfaces? If you think about this as a sales process, are all of our marketing channels aligned to what we need to sell to a target audience? That's the next course that I'll be teaching for people who are like, look, I just want to shift and try something new. I'm hoping to help a lot of designers with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I wish this last course could come earlier, right?
I keep hearing that. I keep telling people I'm working on it as fast as I possibly can.
Yeah, because
coming.
the way the job market is right now, there's a whole lot of chaos and not knowing what to do. You get so many advices from people and you don't actually know what to really take action. There's a lot of stuff out there. I look forward to that also. So we're going to go into the lightning questions, and it's always lightning, but we just always hope it's lightning. It's fast enough. So
It's a new year. We are changing the name. It's no longer, from the next episode, we're not calling it lightning questions
so
anymore.
what should we call it?
It's never fast. We'll just say questions. Get to know you.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, so let's roll. What are your top 3 products you use daily and you love?
Yeah, I love Notion. I run my whole business on Notion. ChatGPT has been something that I've just leaned into the last just few months, especially, which has helped me in a lot of different ways, running my business and being more effective. And then Rocket Money, personally, to manage my finances is a must-have.
Interesting. What is one design resources might not also be the design that you keep going back to always?
Yeah, actually, this is, if it's okay to mention a person, one of my favorite people to follow on LinkedIn is Tom Scott. And he's a recruiter, design recruiter based out of London. He, I think, always has something interesting to say about the industry. And I particularly like the conversation he leads because it is very much about design needing to be part of the business and needing to lead more strategic business initiatives. And so he has a really interesting take as a recruiter on the similar topic that I'm talking about. And he's great at elevating companies and opportunities for designers that are at companies that are actually going to be utilizing a designer in a really effective way. So I think, Tom has a really interesting voice, and I really love reading what he writes.
Yeah, I mean, Tom is a good friend of the podcast. Let me say that. I'm proud to say that. Yeah.
He and I are talking tomorrow morning. So yeah.
Oh, nice. Yes. Say hello to him too from Ini and Emmanuel. Yeah. So next question: the top 3 books you like to recommend?
Yeah, no design books. I think designers have checked that box. The books that I always recommend are How to Win Friends and Influence People, are really great best practices for how to not basically shoot yourself in the foot when it comes to managing stakeholders. Another one that's a lot denser is 48 Laws of Power, which is really cool because it just speaks to how humans have not changed in thousands of years, how we relate to each other, politics, and rules. Either if you follow these rules, you'll do really well with politics and stakeholder management. And if you violate these rules, things will not go so well. So it's definitely 2 books I wish I had read earlier in my career. And then the third book is The Psychology of Money. Just the idea of people think about money, resources, economics very differently. That's okay. But how we think about money and resources really changes all of the decisions we make as people, especially in the workplace too. And so if you want an interesting perspective on why people make the decisions they make, how they're incentivized, The Psychology of Money is a really interesting place to start.
I think I like the last one, and I think I like how they have different varieties to how it should influence us, right? If you are not a designer, what profession you will be instead of where you are right now?
Yeah, I love building. So if I weren't a designer, the most intuitive transition for me would be some kind of a product leader. But ultimately, I can see myself being more of a business leader of some kind, of C-suite executive.
What about outside products or tech?
This is going to be the hardest question of the whole interview.
Emmanuel's taking no prisoners.
This is great. I love scuba. I haven't been able to do as much scuba diving. Specifically, I love scuba diving with sharks. I will actually travel the world to go scuba diving with sharks. So if I could be an underwater shark photographer, that would be my ultimate passion career.
I like that. Yeah. That's. I think that's the other side we want to hear. I think the last guest was talking about him being, a builder, a carpenter, if I couldn't remember. And I like that. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's beyond just pixel.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. So, what's your favorite food? And let's combine with movies.
I love Mexican food. So, I lived in California forever. We had great kind of Tex-Mex. But one of my favorite trips I did for user research was with Airbnb. We went to Mexico City for the week, and we just had the best moles and stuff like that. So Mexican food in any kind of shape or form is absolutely my favorite. And then my favorite movie, probably, if I had to narrow it down to one, which is very difficult for me, it's probably Jurassic Park. I saw it when I was 6 years old, and so it just scared me like crazy. I was way too young for that movie, but I was obsessed with dinosaurs ever since. And so it's just a fun film. I love it.
Okay, this has been really great. Thank you so much, Ryan, for coming on the podcast, and we look forward to seeing you offline.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
Yeah.
All right.
All right,
everybody.
bye, guys.